If you like this video and want more of the most shocking disasters in history, hit the red subscribe button. The first day of November in 1755 was a special day in Lisbon. It was All Saints' Day, a holy day of obligation in the Catholic faith. The city's many magnificent churches were filled with people attending morning mass. The air was still, and the sun shone brightly over Portugal's capital, a bustling hub of a vast global empire. Thousands of candles flickered on altars, casting a warm glow on the devoted congregations. Lisbon was a picture of peace and prosperity, unaware that its world was about to be torn apart from deep within the earth. At approximately 9:40 in the morning, the first tremor struck. It was not a gentle rumble but a sudden violent jolt. The shaking grew in intensity, a deep and terrifying roar emanating from the planet itself. For what felt like an eternity, lasting between 3 and 6 minutes, the very foundations of Lisbon were shredded. This was not just an earthquake, it was one of the most powerful seismic events in recorded history. Modern scientists estimate its magnitude to be somewhere between 7.7 and a staggering 9.0. The ground itself seemed to come alive, splitting open to form massive fissures. Some of these cracks were reported to be up to 5 meters wide, swallowing people and carriages whole. But the most devastating effects beyond the initial quake in Lisbon were yet to come. As the survivors of the earthquake stumbled out from the ruins, they sought refuge in the open spaces. Many fled to the waterfront, to the wide-open square of Terreiro do Paco, believing they would be safe from falling debris. The Tagus River estuary offered a clear view, a space free from the collapsing masonry that had turned the city's narrow streets into death traps. They watched in horror as the water in the harbor began to behave strangely. The river first receded dramatically, exposing the muddy riverbed littered with lost cargo and forgotten shipwrecks. It was a bizarre and ominous sight, a sign that the ocean was gathering its strength. About 40 minutes after the earthquake's violent shaking had subsided, the sea returned with a vengeance. A colossal tsunami wave, estimated to be around 6 meters high, surged into the harbor and up the Tagus River. This was not a gentle tide, but a powerful wall of water moving with incredible speed and force. It slammed into the shoreline, engulfing the crowded square where thousands had gathered for safety. The wave swept people, horses, and the wreckage of carriages into its churning vortex. It obliterated the newly built stone quay, pulling its massive blocks into the river as if they were mere pebbles. The tsunami was not a single event but a series of 3 massive waves. Each one crashed into the coast, pushing further inland. The port, the heart of Lisbon's commercial power, was annihilated. Ships that had been anchored peacefully in the harbor were torn from their moorings, smashed against each other, or thrown far inland. This single geological event demonstrated the profound and terrifying interconnectedness of our planet's systems, linking continents through a shared catastrophe. As if the shaking earth and the invading sea were not enough, a third destroyer was unleashed upon the wounded city. Fire. The earthquake struck on a holy day when every church and home was filled with lighted candles for All Saints' Day. When buildings collapsed, thousands of open flames were knocked over onto wooden beams, tapestries, furniture, scattered papers. Small fires ignited simultaneously across the rubble-strewn city. Survivors, trapped or injured, were in no position to fight the growing flames. The fires quickly merged and grew, feeding on dry wooden structures and fanned by winds sweeping the ruined streets. Individual blazes combined into a monstrous firestorm, an inferno of incredible heat and intensity that created its own wind system. The blaze raged uncontrollably for 5 days. In some areas, the smoke and flames lingered longer. It devoured everything the earthquake and tsunami had left behind. The sky darkened under a thick plume of smoke visible for miles. The firestorm became the greatest destroyer of Lisbon's cultural heritage. It consumed the magnificent Ribeira Palace. It destroyed the Royal Library, over 70,000 volumes reduced to ash. Priceless works of art were lost. Paintings by Titian, paintings by Rubens, the Opera do Tejo newly opened that year, burned to the ground. Countless historical records, including logs of explorers like Vasco da Gama, were lost forever. Irreplaceable treasures turned to ash. A huge part of Portugal's history was erased. The heat made rescue efforts impossible and raised the death toll. The fires got hot enough to melt metal and to calcify stone, leaving a scorched, skeletal cityscape. When the flames died down, Lisbon was a smoldering, blackened ruin. The city had been assaulted by a trio of forces: earthquake, tsunami, fire, each compounding the horror, leaving a scar that would never fully heal. If you like this video and want more of the most shocking disasters in history, hit the red subscribe button. The scale of the devastation was almost beyond comprehension. When the dust, when the water, when the smoke finally cleared, Lisbon was a ghost of its former self. It is estimated that around 85% of the city's buildings were destroyed. The disaster claimed a shocking number of lives. Historians estimate that between 30,000 and 60,000 people perished in Lisbon alone. Thousands more died in southwestern Spain, Morocco, particularly from the effects of the tsunami. In the immediate aftermath, society broke down. The city was plunged into chaos and lawlessness. With government infrastructure demolished and authorities overwhelmed, criminals took advantage. Hordes of looters descended upon the ruins. To restore order, the king's prime minister, the Marquis of Pombal, took drastic action. He ordered gallows to be erected throughout the city to execute looters on the spot, a grim but effective measure to curb the rampant crime. His famous practical command was to bury the dead and heal the living, continuing previous line. Remarkably, the Portuguese royal family survived the disaster unharmed. On that fateful morning they had left the city to spend the holiday at a palace in the countryside. King Joseph I was so terrified by the experience that he developed a severe case of claustrophobia. For the rest of his life, he refused to live within stone walls. He and his court resided in a large complex of wooden buildings and tents erected on the hills of Ajuda, which became the new center of government. The earthquake had not only shattered a city, but it also deeply traumatized its king. The economic impact was devastating for the Portuguese Empire. Lisbon was not just a capital city, it was the heart of a global trading network. Its destruction crippled the nation's economy. The port was in ruins, warehouses full of goods were destroyed, and the administrative centers of commerce were gone. The cost of rebuilding was immense, and the disaster marked the beginning of a decline in Portugal's political and economic power on the world stage. The empire had been built on centuries of exploration and trade, but its magnificent centerpiece was now a pile of rubble and ash. The Lisbon earthquake did more than just destroy a city, it sent shockwaves through the intellectual and philosophical landscape of 18th century Europe. Many saw disasters as divine punishment, God's wrath against a sinful populace. It struck on a major Catholic holiday, it destroyed so many churches. It left the city's red light district relatively unscathed. Thinkers across Europe began to question traditional explanations. Why would a benevolent God inflict indiscriminate suffering? This became a turning point in the Age of Enlightenment. Voltaire seized upon the disaster. He used it to challenge philosophical optimism, as argued by Leibniz. Voltaire wrote a poem about the Lisbon disaster. He also wrote the satirical novel Candide. He highlighted random suffering and nature's indifference. The quake forced people to look beyond divine will. It encouraged a shift toward scientific, observable explanations. Many consider this the birth of modern seismology. For the first time, a disaster was studied scientifically and systematically. The Marquis of Pombal ordered a detailed, nationwide survey. The survey asked when the earthquake started, how long it lasted, what direction the shaking came from, what damage was caused. This coordinated data collection became a priceless resource. The 1755 quake forced humanity to confront the planet's immense impersonal power. It challenged old beliefs and paved the way for new sciences. It showed the Earth is dynamic and sometimes violent. It pushed Europe away from fatalism toward inquiry and resilience. The rebuilt city of Lisbon rose not just from stone but on reason and science.